Hi everyone. I wanted to quickly chat about anger management today and specifically my top 10 tips for managing your anger better. Okay, this is following, of course, my brief vlog on anger and why I think I have been seeing escalating number of cases of patients presenting with anger and associated emotions. I thought, yeah, it's probably worth me putting some thought into developing some top tips on how we can all manage our anger better. So, tip number one is pause. So, when you're caught up in that escalating tension in an argument, heated argument, whether it's at home or at the work environment, one of the key things and most important things to do is to pause. So, either do some breathing, so take some slow breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, or count to 10 or count to 20 if 10 doesn't work, but count. Or some patients have also told me, so I've actually learned from patients that saying a little mantra in your mind also helps, such as saying a quick phrase like, I can do this, or this will be okay, I am safe, or just relax. So something, you've got to personalize it, but come up with a mantra that you will then say to yourself in your mind when you find yourself in a tense situation. And the other one is to do some stretches or muscle relaxation. So stretch your neck, stretch your back, stand up if you're at the office, stretch a bit, or progressive muscle relaxation. And that's a whole exercise that I or psychologists could teach you. But tip number one, pause. Deep breathing, count to 10, say a mantra, or do some stretches. Okay. Tip number two and tip number three are joined or associated, and they are either leave the room or can't leave the room. So if you can leave the room, then do so. That helps to also de-escalate and diffuse whatever mounting tension there might be. So even if you're in a very small apartment, go to the bathroom. If you're at work, you might not be able to leave the room. So we'll talk about that under tip number three. But if you can, leave the room. Even better, if it's safe and it's accessible, go outside, take a walk. Getting some fresh air and stretching your legs and being maybe positively distracted by the environment, the trees or the birds, etc., might serve to diffuse and neutralize that escalating anger and emotions in you. Another point that I want to raise is that when you leave the room, please try and do that with as much respect as possible. Given that this is now a very tense situation, we want to try not to be rude or come across as being passive aggressive, because that would escalate and not diffuse. It will be counterproductive. Right, so that's if you can leave the room. If you cannot leave the room, such as if you're at a meeting at work or so forth, then you can practice some other strategies. Now, these are a little bit tricky and not always as easy. Doesn't always work for everyone, but these are some tips that some clients, some patients have told me they have used. And that is, either imagine that your lips are glued or sealed just for 5 minutes. So just sit for 5 minutes. It's almost like you're a kid playing Simon Says, be quiet for 5 minutes. Very difficult when you have escalating anger, but also very powerful if you can keep that silence. And the second one is imagining or using your imagination. So try and imagine that, so you take yourself out of that situation and you take yourself to a happy place, whether that's lying on a beach or sitting in your room, But just take yourself out of that space for 5 minutes so that you can allow your thoughts and your emotions to de-escalate. Okay, so that's tip number 2 and 3. Tip number 4, gather your thoughts. Very, very important point as well. And ultimately, you have to make a choice. And there's 2 options. Either speak now or forever hold your peace. No, that's not it. So speak now or come up with a lovely phrase. So this is something you can practice and personalize. But my phrase would be, is it possible that we can chat a little later, because I do not feel that I will do us or this topic or this issue justice if I speak now, because my emotions are all over the place. So that's very respectful. It's also allowing you to hold your space. It's allowing you to acknowledge your emotions. So you being assertive but respectful, and you're able to request something from the other person. So that's tip number 4. Tip number 5 is keep your word. Okay, so don't say, let's talk about this later, and then not come back to it. Keep your word. And you and the other person can set a time frame, and it depends on the issue or the event and whether it's at home, family environment, or a work environment, about what that timeline should be. Tip number 6 and 7. 6 is the environment in which you engage with this topic again. And tip number 7 is the words that you use. So number 6 is the environment. Now, if you are prone to anger and becoming emotional, then it would be good to give some consideration to where you would like to talk. You would like to choose an environment that is neutral, that is not going to cause any inflammatory emotions to come up or provoke you in any way, but an environment that is also going to afford adequate privacy so that a good conversation can occur. And then the next one is words or communication. Now, of course, because I do this for a living, and we talk a lot in therapy around words and how things are being said, body language, facial expression, and so on. So we want to be aware of that when we're communicating, because often when you're becoming angry, as much as the other person or the situation is triggering or provoking you, your actions, your words, your body language is also contributing to the escalation of the situation. And therefore, the opposite is also true. So in other words, your body language, your facial expression, the words, the tone of voice is also going to help to diffuse and de-escalate the situation. So we want you to avoid inflammatory or accusatory words. And an example would be, avoid using phrases like, you always do this, or you never do this. Avoid using phrases or language or gesturing in this way. Avoid being accusatory or inflammatory. Okay. Tip number 8, triggers. Now, what are triggers? Triggers are words or people or places that trigger or provoke an emotional response. And in this case, of course, it's anger. So if you have a problem with anger or managing your anger, then become aware, educate yourself on what your triggers are. If your trigger is being late in the morning and rushing around and, getting to work and you're stomping up to your office and you're like, oh, I don't have time for this, then you need to unfortunately get up a bit early and plan manage your time a bit better. So identify your triggers and then strategize around them. However, triggers can also be a bit tricky. So for example, if your trigger is your child doesn't want to clean up their room, then you're going to have to meet halfway and strategize, right? Got to be realistic as well. So for example, you might then compromise and say, okay, my child's going to clean their room once a week, and then the rest of the week, I'm going to agree to close the door so that I don't have to see the mess, and therefore I'm able to regulate my emotions better. Okay, so that's how triggers work, by identifying and then managing them. And it's not perfect, it's not ideal, and it does require work from both parties. Okay, that was tip number 8. Tip number 9. When we look at deep-seated anger, or anger that's been allowed to sort of brew and stew for a long time, then the techniques might be slightly different. For example, if there's been a family feud and you've had this deep resentment or anger towards someone, then another tip or strategy to try and de-escalate or diffuse that anger that you've been sitting with might be to write a letter. Now, this is a very special letter because we do not want you to post or to ever give the letter to that person. That's not the intention. The intention of this letter is to allow you to vent, to write and to say whatever you'd like to this person. And then when it's done, and I've got 100% feedback from all the patients that have done this, that have said that this has brought them immense release. They actually feel that burden coming off the shoulders. You can take that step further, and I've had patients say, not all of them, but some of them say they tear up the letter or they burn the letter in a safe manner, but burn the letter, and that also helps to release that tension and anger that you've been carrying. Okay, so write a letter. Another tip, obviously similar to that, would be to journal. Just vent out the feelings. If you had a terrible day at work and you want to write stuff, just vent everything out in a journal. Also helps you to feel much better. So get those emotions out. Tip number 10. Okay, tip number 10 is manage your stress on a daily, on a regular level. This will allow you to increase your emotional capacity to manage your anger, your emotions better. So look after yourself, sleep enough, eat well, engage in hobbies, exercise or creative hobbies, engage with people, and seek out support. Talk to a family member or friend. You don't have to also deal with things all by yourself. Okay, those are the top 10 tips. Hope you find them useful, and I hope you practice or, put some of them into use. Let me know how it goes. Bye.